So what we covered today in class were carbohydrates and lipids. Carbohydrates are used by the body for energy and short-term energy storage. So what I mean here is that we use it for our immediate energy to satisfy our immediate energy needs, and we use it for short-term energy storage, not long-term. Carbohydrates are macromolecules, which means that they are true polymers. There are many monomers connected together to make a long chain. In carbohydrates, the monomers are called monosaccharides. Monosaccharides are also known as simple sugars. There are 3 of these monosaccharides or simple sugars. There's glucose, fructose, and galactose. Glucose is the one simple sugar that our body uses for energy. Fructose is found in fruits, and galactose is milk sugar. All 3 of those monomers, if you look at those pictures, are made of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, just those 3 elements. Therefore, if we're going to link those together to make a long chain, the entire carbohydrate contains nothing but carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. We can link these monomers together in 2 different ways, make 2 different polymers from them. They are disaccharides and polysaccharides. The prefix di means 2. So in a disaccharide, 2 of these monomers, 2 of these monosaccharides are linked together to make one molecule. Sucrose is an example of a disaccharide. It is a glucose molecule and a fructose molecule that has been bonded together. Sucrose is table sugar. It's what you put in your Rice Krispies. The prefix poly means many. So when we say polysaccharide, we take many monomers, many monosaccharides, linked them together into a long chain. Starches are an example of a polysaccharide. Monosaccharides are used for immediate energy. As I mentioned, glucose is the one sugar that our bodies burn for energy. Polysaccharides are used for energy storage. Plants use starches for energy storage. Animals like humans use a compound called glycogen. There's a difference though. When a plant makes a starch, that is for long-term energy storage. Think potatoes. When a potato plant is out there photosynthesizing in the sun, it's making more energy than what it needs to maintain its structures and grow. So it takes that excess energy, puts it away as a starch in the potato, and that is long-term energy storage for the plant. In humans, glycogen is just a short-term storage molecule. It is not meant to last long. Animals like humans will use lipids for their long-term storage. When we eat starches, we have to break those starches down into simple sugars for our body to use. Again, because what we use for our immediate energy is glucose. So anything we eat, including starches, has to be broken down into glucose for our body to use it. This is why things like cross-country runners and people that compete in track and field will eat pasta before they have a meet. Pasta is full of starches. It takes your body time to break those starches down, convert them into glucose for our bodies to burn for immediate energy. If you eat nothing but sugars, your body can burn through those pretty quickly. And you usually get a quick energy rush that lasts for maybe an hour, and then you crash afterwards pretty quickly. When you eat pasta, it takes time for your body to break those sugars down, convert them into glucose before it can be used. So the energy that you get from a plate of pasta will last for hours. Gets you all the way through a cross-country meet, gets you all the way through a track and field meet. Now, if you do eat too many calories, you do have too much sugar floating around in your bloodstream, your body's not going to waste it. Your body is built for survival, so if there's any extra energy around, it's going to store that energy away for later. And what our bodies will do is make glycogen to hold on to it for a little longer. If we don't use that glycogen within a certain amount of time, our bodies will convert it to fat, a lipid. Lipids are organic compounds that have 2 parts. They have a glycerol head, and they have 3 fatty acid tails attached to it. Looks something like this. This part over here, that's the glycerol head. These 3 strings of carbon that you see attached to it are the 3 fatty acid tails. Now, there is no monomer polymer here. Lipids are not polymers. They don't have any repeating monomers. They don't have a chain-like structure. And because they're not polymers, some sources will not consider them to be a macromolecule. Some sources consider a macromolecule to be only things that are true polymers. Others will call it a macromolecule because it's large, so it's a bit confusing. Bottom line is there are no monomers in polymers when you're looking at a lipid. You just have that glycerol head and you have those fatty acid tails. Lipids can be saturated or unsaturated. Saturated lipids are what your doctor would call bad fats. They tend to be solids at room temperature. Things like butter, bacon grease, lard, shortening. Those are saturated lipids. Unsaturated lipids, what your doctor would call good fats. These are things like olive oil and canola oil. They are mostly liquids at room temperature, so they are a lot of oils. The difference between the two is the bonding in the fatty acid chains, those 3 tails that trail off the back of the fat. In a saturated fat, there's nothing but single bonds down the chain. So if you look at this chain of carbons here, it's all single dashes between the C's. That is a saturated fatty acid. They're called saturated because they contain the maximum amount of hydrogen that each carbon can have. Note, as you go down the chain, each carbon is linked to 2 hydrogens. Each carbon is full of hydrogens. The one on the end gets 3 because there's no carbon over here. Saturated fat means it's linked up to the maximum number of hydrogens you could possibly have, and that only happens when there's nothing but single bonding down the chain. An unsaturated fat will have at least 1 double or triple bond in them. Here we can see the double bond in the middle of this unsaturated fatty acid. And what that does is it takes a hydrogen away from each of these 2 carbons. So this chain doesn't have the maximum number of hydrogens in it, so it is called unsaturated. Here it is in the full molecular view. You can see this whole thing's a fat molecule. These 3 fatty acid chains have nothing but single bonds in it. This is an unsaturated lipid. You can see that double bond and that crooked chain on the bottom there. Lipids have a number of different uses and a number of different functions by the body. What you're going to see is lipids and proteins are the ones with the most varied uses. They have twice the energy of a carbohydrate, so they're good for long-term energy storage. As I said, this is what animals like humans use lipids for. Carbohydrates are immediate energy. Lipids are for energy storage. They're made of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, just like carbohydrates, but unlike carbohydrates, they're not water-soluble. Their glycerol head is hydrophilic, loves water. But those fatty acid tails are hydrophobic, so they don't. And it's those tails that keep them from dissolving in water. Because they are not dissolved in water, they are part of our cell membranes. They are what keep our cells intact, is what keep our cells from dissolving into our bloodstreams. And it allows the cell to control what goes in, what comes out. Steroids are also lipids. Steroids serve many functions in the body. One steroid is cholesterol. Its main function is regulating metabolism. It has others. It controls how much energy we make, how many sugars we burn. When you're stressed, your body produces excess cholesterol because it thinks it's going to need a lot of energy, and it ups its energy production. So again, it controls that metabolism process. Some hormones are lipids. They're chemical messengers that coordinate our body functions. Testosterone is one such lipid hormone. It controls a number of things, including bone mass, fat distribution, and muscle mass. Men carry their fat in their abdomens because of testosterone. It's just testosterone telling our body where to put the fat. Fat-soluble vitamins are lipids, vitamins A, K, E, and D. They're nutrients that our body needs normally. Vitamin A, for example, is used for vision, growth, cell division, reproduction, and immunity. Without it, those systems don't function right. So you got to eat fat in order to get some of those fat-soluble vitamins in your diet. Waxes are also lipids. Waxes are substances used by plants to protect them from environmental stress. A lot of saltwater plants are covered in wax to keep the salt water away from them. Salt water would burn them out and kill them. The wax protects that from happening, keeps that from happening. They're low density molecules. This makes them good for insulation. So animals that live in cold climates usually have thick fat layers. You can see it on the walruses here. That fat is what keeps them warm enough in the winter, keeps them alive. And finally, because of their low density nature, they're used for cushioning. We have fat in our abdomens to protect our internal organs. We have fat on the bottoms of our feet to protect our bones from damage whenever our feet impact with the ground. So that's it for this one. The next thing we'll cover is the nucleic acids and the proteins.